Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where we've got a great program lined up for you today. I'm not hosting today, but my good friend Janet Porter is, and you won't want to miss today's program. Janet is the founder of Faith to Action. She's the author of the original heartbeat bill in America, which got passed by, I think, almost 20 states in this country, banning abortion after a heartbeat is detected. She's also a great culture warrior and a good friend of this ministry, so I know you're going to enjoy today's show.
Hello, I'm Janet Porter. I am filling in for Richard Harris with Truth and Liberty, and it's such a privilege and an honor to be here. I want to start off with a book recommendation. You got to get this thing. Richard Harris has put it together. It's called Faith for America. It's going to encourage you. You know, there's so much going on, and there's so many noises and so many voices. Even when things were looking bleak in our country, they had hope. Why? Because we have God, and God has intervened in America. We all saw it in the elections. We saw it when President Trump decided to turn his head at just the right moment to dodge a bullet, literally. It's encouraging for you, and we need that right now. Faith for America. You can get it at Truth and Liberty GTN, standing for the Gospel Truth Network, or Get This Now. Truth and Liberty. GTN.com. Get a hold of Richard's book. You will not regret it. I have an author, a best-selling author, who's going to be joining with in just a minute. But I just want to make a statement. You know, sometimes there's a lot of people talking about where we're going as a nation. There's a lot of really good things happening. You know, our border's becoming secure. Our gas prices are down. We're seeing tax cuts. We're seeing all kinds of really, really good things. But we've taken a step back in an area that we need to advance in. We saw it in the life issue. We saw the Republican Party platform weakened and watered down really, really bad. We saw abortion treated as a liability in the election, that, oh no, we've got to hide from this issue. We got to remember that Kamala Harris spent, hundreds of millions of dollars to run on the issue of abortion and lose on the issue of abortion. So I want to call out all the pro-lifers who are cowered in the corners and saying, well, we're doing other things that are good, and we're helping kids from mutilation. We're doing other things. But you know what? This is not the time to back down on life. And this is not the time to say, oh, well, it's a states issue, so let's just let the blue states be blue. Let's let the death states and the life states. No. Life is not a state issue. It's not only a state issue, because it's a constitutional life. It's a God-given issue. It's guaranteed in our Constitution, and it's inalienable. It's something that we cannot legislate away. And what the 14th Amendment says, it says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life. Well, that's what's happening in California and New York and all the blue states, purple states. It's all happening with these ballot initiatives. But it's a violation, a direct violation of our God-given inalienable right and our Constitution, which every member of Congress, the Supreme Court, the President, the Vice President, all swore to uphold. So I'm reading the Constitution. I find out there's something in it I missed. In Section 5 of the 14th Amendment that says we have equal protection under the law. The same amendment that says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life. In that, it says Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. In other words, hey, all you guys who swore to uphold the Constitution, guess what? You're supposed to enforce it. You need to enforce that part about equal protection. And it's not just a states issue any more than liberty is a state issue. Liberty is a national issue, because you know what? If we didn't take that seriously, if we didn't deal with it federally, then we might have some slave states today. No. Liberty is a God-given right. It's one that can't be taken away. It took a civil war to get us there, but I'm going to tell you something. God is still the same God that wrote with his finger in stone, thou shalt not kill. And you know what? For God to bless America, we need to obey God. And yes, I celebrate all the good things that are happening, but we need to step out. And I think right now the way to do it is to jumpstart the appropriate legislation that enforces the 14th Amendment. And one of the things that does that is H.R. 682. It's the federal heartbeat bill. Congressman Mike Kelly is the sponsor this time around. And we're going to help jumpstart it with a postcard campaign. It's pretty easy. You click a button. If you go to heartbeatbill.com or faith2action, f2a.org, you can actually click a button and send postcards not only to the president, to the vice president, to the Supreme Court, but to every Republican in Congress, every Republican in the Senate. Or, you know what? The Democrats, they took an oath too. Let's send it to all of them and remind them that their job is to uphold the 14th Equal Protection Amendment in the Constitution. And click a button. I'll tell you this, though. You can notice by the prices, we don't cover all the costs. We wanted to get volume. We want to get a whole bunch of postcards coming in. So if you'd like to make an additional donation, can help pay for the printing and postage, because we're sending tangible postcards from you to members of Congress, the Supreme Court, the President and Vice President, explaining to them that slavery isn't a state's issue, that to deny a heartbeat is just as slavery is a state issue, then neither is right to life. It's God-given, it's inalienable, and guaranteed in the Constitution they swore to uphold. So just as to deny a heartbeat is to deny science and to ignore it is heartless, this is the message to jumpstart the federal heartbeat bill and actually protect children. Roe versus Wade is in the ash heap of history. It's time we do something about it. Beyond fighting these ballot initiatives, beyond passing laws in the states, we can end it, and we can do it nationally for every child whose heartbeat can be heard. That's my message to you, but I've got another message, and that is one that we have the freedom to use to learn from history. There's a very famous quote, you've heard it before, that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Well, we've got a guest who's going to make sure we don't repeat the history of some things we've gone awry. His name is Bill Federer. He's been a friend of mine for many, many years. He stayed with my husband and I during the Republican convention. He's an author of America's God and Country. He's written I don't know how many books you up to, Bill?
30.
30. Oh my goodness. This one's my favorite. And this is one when we were together in Washington, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was the keynote, and he sees you in the audience. He says, "There's my friend, there's Bill Federer. Hey, Bill, I got your book. It's on my desk. I use it every day." Or I don't know if he said every day, but he uses it a lot. And it was, in fact, you heard it in his recent quotes about the big, beautiful bill. He quoted several of our founders, President Reagan. All of this can be found in your book. But you've written another book. Tell us about it, especially in light of the fact that we see in New York an advancement of what President Trump calls a communist. They go by the democratic socialist, but pretty soon you run out of other people's money. We've got a guy who's likely to be the next mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, I think is how you say it. He's a guy that he's pretty racist. He wants to tax white neighborhoods disproportionately. He's against the Jewish race. He's also somebody who wants to give every free program under the sun and make the taxpayer pay for it. If there weren't enough people leaving New York, there'll be a bunch more. We just welcome you, Bill. I'm just so grateful that you've got the background of what people do to promote this nonsense and what we can do to stop it. So first off, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Janet. And before I get into my topic, I want to let everyone know I did a brand new book with my son. It's called Courageous Christianity, and it goes through the muscular Christianity movement of the 19th century, which is the 1800s. And this idea that you can be a strong Christian so that you can defend the weak, you can stand up for righteousness, no more of the wimpy stuff. Teddy Roosevelt, who lived in New York, was the epitome of muscular Christianity. And anyway, that's a book for another interview.
By the way, I want to interject that. That's the book that talks about the fact that the YMCA was founded for the Christian Men's Association. They were the precipice for the Olympics, right?
Right.
Am I getting that right from our last conversation?
Yeah, that it was the athletes that in 1844 was when it was founded. It quickly went around the world. Instead of young men going to taverns, and they could go to a place where they could have Bible studies and pray and then exercise. And within 10 years, it's in a dozen different countries, and then they would exercise and compete. And then somebody saw that French guy named de Coubertin, and he says, "Hey, let's bring back the Olympics." And one of the sports that was invented by the YMCA was basketball, and it was an evangelistic tool. So you go to China and try to witness on the street, good luck with that. But if you play basketball and the Chinese young men see it and you say, "Hey, you want to play? I'll show you how." And you get to be friends, and then you sit down, you're winded, and somebody opens up a Bible. And it
That's
became the
fantastic.
best witnessing tool worldwide. Cuba, India, Philippines, all around. And anyway,
Seems like we've
fascinating
lost
book.
sight of that, but that's great. The book, once again, hold it up one more time so we can see
This
that
one
one.
is called Courageous Christianity,
That's
how a
great.
19th century revival, right, Charles Finney, gave birth to the muscular Christianity movement, YMCA athletics, and a youth-led movement to save the world, right? Because these youth were going on missionary trips all around the world. And the YMCAs was where they would have revival meetings. So
So it's interesting
fascinating.
that song is what has been the theme song of President Trump. We just got to take it back to its Christian heritage and not to how it's been altered or perverted. But let's get to the matter at hand here. When you're looking at New York, when you're looking at the campaigns that have pushed socialism, you've got some background on that. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so that book is called Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present. And why Plato? He's the first one that talked about everybody owning everything in common. And it sounds good till you think it through. Somebody has to be in the government handing out the common stuff. And they're always going to be tempted to want to funnel a little extra to their family and friends and hold back from someone they don't like. And it gets discretionary. And the saying is, he who holds the purse strings has the power. So every attempt at everybody owning everything equally always ends up with a deep state bureaucracy passing out favors to their friends with the most corrupt guy at the top, a dictator, right? So you got the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Nazi stands for National Socialist Workers Party, right? You got Kim Jong-un in North Korea and the CCP in China. Socialism is a bait and switch for dictatorship. And so Karl Marx said that communism can be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. And Lenin said socialism is a transition phase to communism. And so abolition of private property. It's interesting that when the children of Israel went into the promised land, every family was given what? Property. If you own property, you can accumulate stuff. The Bible called that being blessed. And you can give away some of your stuff. The Bible called that charity. And it's voluntary. Well, when socialism takes away your stuff involuntarily and gives it to somebody you'll never meet, and they don't care where the money came from, and people say, well, wasn't the early church socialist? No, the early church was the early church. Socialism is counterfeit early church. And the differences between the word voluntary and involuntary.
That's right.
So the early believers owned property, and some of them sold it and laid it at the feet of the apostles for the church to distribute. And the church would have orphanages and take care of the poor and feed the widows. And it wasn't the early church having their property involuntarily taken away, and they were forced to lay it at the feet of Pilate for the Roman government to redistribute. Here, Roman government, here's a little more money for you to distribute. No, that they'll funnel it to their, and whenever the government gets involved, there's always a political element to it. When the church helps people, they actually have a word, it's called disinterested benevolence, right? So you are giving money without any anticipation of something in return. You're just helping somebody because you want to act like God and share the love of God. And so you're moved with compassion to help somebody. And that person feels the love of God through a real person. And through that, a relationship is developed, a trust where you can share the gospel message. And then they want to emulate that. And at some point in their future, they get successful and they contribute and this thing grows. Well, when the government helps people, it's always in exchange for something. In Egypt, you need food. The government comes and says, we'll give you food, but it's in exchange for your cattle, your land, your lives, your children, your votes, right? And so it is a interested benevolence. There's a advantage that you want to get over the other person. And so if you don't own any property, how can you be charitable? What are you going to steal from somebody, break the law, now you're a thief? No, the whole thing comes down to God entrusts you with stuff, and then gives you opportunities to demonstrate on the outside the love of God that's on the inside.
You know what? It's
And so,
interesting. We see a movement against property taxes, which I think is a great movement because we're really not owning our property if we have to pay taxes on it. It's like renting. But there are states that are trying to get rid of the property tax, and I think that's a fantastic move. But on the other side, we see, the movement, more entitlement, more free programs, more socialism, and more taxes. So run us down the gamut of how we've seen these things work in the past, how they've taken, the marketing of products and they've used it to market these really bad ideas like socialism.
right. So there's two ways to get people with freedoms to give up their freedoms. One is fear, and the other is free stuff, right? If you get the population in fear, they will panic and knee-jerk reaction. They'll surrender their freedoms to some political leader who promises to fix it.
Like COVID-19, for example.
Like COVID-19, like these different pandemics, and they'll want to pass something in the past, and then they'll whip the country up into a panic. And
by the way, I just want to interject here. I just have to say this. It's so great to know men and women of courage that stood in that time, that said, you know what, we're not going to not meet together. We're not going to let the government control what we do. And one of the people that did that is Andrew Womack, who sued the governor of Colorado, I think twice, when he finally said, "Uncle, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone." But ultimately he stood, and he stood really in the face of such adversity that he could have lost his freedom and his ministry. But what an encouraging thing to look back and say, hey, you know what? I know that guy. He stood against it and won. And so freedom is one, and free stuff's the other.
Yeah. I am reminded. Andrew was sharing how he put it all on the line, and being such a large ministry, all the smaller ministries were benefiting from him taking a stand. They were like under his umbrella. If he would have caved, then they would have not had any ability to resist. And but he shared how they were having a hearing, and he was getting up and getting dressed, and his wife Jamie was getting dressed too. And he says, "Well, why are you getting dressed?" She said, "Well, they're probably going to arrest you today, and they'll probably stick the camera in my face and ask me for a comment." And I mean, here, even Jamie
in America.
Andrew was going to get arrested. I mean, he literally put his entire ministry on the line, but he had faith and said,
Praise
wait
the
a
Lord.
second, it is not right that abortion places stay open, big box stores stay open, marijuana shops stay open, abortion
Liquor
clinics
stores.
stay open, but you got to shut down a church. And then the governor of the state was telling protesters, "Oh, okay, you can meet together and riot and exercise your First Amendment rights, but at the same time tell churches you can't meet together and can't exercise your First Amendment rights." It was so obviously arbitrary that the governor lost in court.
Which leads me to the Reagan quote that says, "Evil is powerless if the good are unafraid." Just thought I'd interject that because of the courage of people like Andrew Womack. So yeah, it can happen if you let it, but if you stand and you fight, then we see the victory. So you mentioned one is fear, and the other is free stuff.
Right. So a drug dealer takes over a neighborhood two ways. He can come in with guns and get everybody into fear, or he can give away free drugs until you get hooked. And then you want some more free drugs, you're going to incrementally give up your freedom till before you know it, you're selling yourself into prostitution. And so this idea, it's a front door, back door approach. It's like a hunter. You can hunt animals with a gun, or you can hunt animals with a trap. And if you study how to catch wild pigs in Texas and some states, they have lots of wild pigs. And you put a post in the ground and you throw some corn down. And the pigs come and eat the corn, ignore the post. Next day, there's two posts in the ground. Well, the pigs come, ignore the two posts and eat the corn. Next day, three posts, four posts, and you start putting the posts in a semicircle. And the pigs come, eat the corn, they keep ignoring what's going on until pretty soon there's just a little opening. And they squeeze through the opening and they're eating the corn, and you shut the gate and you caught yourself some wild pigs. You trap them through dependency. And so this is actually They have a name for it. It's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. And so in the 1940s, you had FDR in America, and at Columbia University was Richard Cloward, Francis Piven. They were socialists. A lot of socialist professors there at Columbia. That's where
Still.
former President Obama went. And so the Cloward-Piven strategy is you're not going to institute socialism in America with tanks. But if you destabilize the economy and get everybody to need government assistance, and then the government comes along and says, "Well, we'll put you on welfare. We'll put you on Medicaid. We'll give you government money, and we just need you to sign up for it." And then once you sign up for it, then they will incrementally require you to give up a little more freedom. Like, okay, you have to, in order for you to continue to get this, you have to let us track you where you go. You've got to get rid of the guns in your house. You can't have a father in the home if you want to continue with the welfare. And then you have generational indebtedness to the government, and you can perpetuate this. So Lyndon Johnson instituted this Cloward-Piven strategy. He called it the Great Society Welfare State. So you want to get as many people as possible to sign up for welfare, and then they'll be willing to give up their freedom to keep the welfare coming. And then Lyndon Johnson changed the immigration quotas in 1965. So prior to then, most immigrants came from countries that had a Judeo-Christian work ethic, and it was considered a social stigma to receive welfare. You would have, immigrants from Europe and even the Black culture in America. It was considered a social stigma to receive welfare. I wrote a book on George Washington Carver, and he said, "I never allowed anyone to give me money, no difference how badly I needed it. I wanted literally to earn my own living." And so this was the attitude. It was considered a social failure to have your neighbor being successful, and in the back of your mind that you're receiving free stuff. It's actually a phenomenon that's studied by psychologists that if somebody receives free stuff long enough, it hurts their self-esteem, and they begin to want to blame somebody for their low self-esteem, and they end up blaming the entity that is causing the problem, the government that's giving them free stuff. They end up hating the very government that gives them the free stuff. It's this bizarre psychological.
And hating those that are creating jobs and businesses and people that have worked for money. They end up, remember the whole Occupy movement? That was all just based on envy, really, and funding from George Soros and his ilk. So give us some of the techniques, though. I want to learn how we got here to learn how we can get out of here.
Yeah, well, the fear and free stuff, to create fear, you have to have a crisis. So if everything's fine, why do I need to give up my freedom to settle for an answer if everything's fine? You have to create division. And this goes back to Lucifer, goes back to him being in heaven. He's a beautiful angel. And then he gets puffed up with pride. And in Luke 14, he said, "I will ascend to the mountains of the north. I will put my throne above the throne of God. I will be like the Most High. I will. We got two wills going on in heaven. And they're not the same will. So there's division. There's conflict. There's war. There's war in heaven. And there can only be one will for there to be peace, and it's God's will, and it's a good will, and he created you out of nothing and wants to love you forever, right? But when Lucifer comes along, there's two wills, and so he's cast out of heaven, and he goes into the garden, and he gets Adam and Eve to sin and choose their will over God's will, and he sows division. Gets Adam to blame Eve, and then he gets Cain to kill Abel, sows division. There's an interesting story of Abimelech. Who's he? Gideon rescues Israel from 100,000 Midianites, and then Gideon has lots of sons, and he also has an illegitimate son named Abimelech, and his mother was from the town of Shechem. And so now Abimelech is all grown, and he goes to the town of Shechem, and he says, Is it better for you that all the sons of Gideon reign over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. And his brethren spake of him in the ears of the men of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. So he's identifying with these people on a fleshly level, right? He's a bro. He's one of us, right? And whether he's good at what he does or not. And then he goes to the pagan temple in town, temple of Baal-berith, and he takes 70 pieces of silver with which he hires vain and worthless persons which follow him to do what? Create violence and kill and go to his half-brother's house at Ophrah and slews all the brethren. And then it says the men of Shechem made Abimelech king. So let's analyze this. You got the nation of Israel. It's one. It's at peace. There's no outside enemies, right? Gideon just defeated 100,000, so no country's thinking about invading. But on the inside, you got somebody that wants power, and he sows division, and he gets people to side with him on a fleshly level. And then in the confusion, he seizes power and makes himself king. Now, the Hebrew Republic would have ended here rather than a century later with King Saul, had not somebody threw a millstone over the wall and it killed Abimelech. But this idea of divide and conquer, there was a Indian advisor to a king, Chandragupta, and this Indian advisor was called Chanakya, and India was a bunch of kingdoms. And so he came up with the idea of sowing division between the kingdoms, and in their confusion, Chandragupta could seize power. But Machiavelli brought it to Europe. And so 500 years ago, Italy was a bunch of city-states: Venice, Genoa, Naples, Florence, Siena, and they always fought. And Machiavelli thought if one prince could control all these Italian city-states, it would stop the infighting. So he writes a book called The Prince, where he advocates the ends justifies the means. The end of one prince controlling all of Italy is such a good end because it'll stop all the infighting that any means necessary to get there is justified. Lie, cheat, steal. So if a prince conquers a city and the city does not want to be conquered, they would hate him. But if the prince pays criminals like Abimelech did, vain and worthless persons, to do what? To commit violence and smash windows and set things on fire and
this is sounding familiar.
People to panic, then everyone will beg for some government leader to come in and restore order, and the prince will come in and get rid of the very criminals that he bribed under the table to commit the violence, and the people will praise the prince as a hero, and he'll end up taking over as the king, right? And so the Machiavellian attitude is summed up in the alliteration: create or capitalize on a crisis to consolidate control. Create or capitalize on a crisis to consolidate control. So it really doesn't matter what the crisis is. Your goal is to get people to panic and surrender a little bit of their freedom.
Because you don't want a crisis to go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel said. Interesting that they pay the agitators, and then they raise someone up out of that group as a solution. That's interesting. We've seen some of that mirrored in America. I want to talk about some of that when we come back. My guest is Bill Federer. He is a prolific writer. He is a best-selling author. He is a friend, and he is telling us what has happened historically, not just in American history, but world history, how we can learn from it, how we can see it coming and prevent the downfalls that we've seen in the past. I am Janet Porter. I'm filling in for Richard Harris, who is the host of Truth and Liberty. It's my honor to be a part of this. And by the way, pick up Richard Harris's book when you can. It's called Faith for America, and you can get that at truthandlibertygtn.com. Truthandlibertygtn, like gospeltruthnetwork.com. And we'll be back in just a moment with more from Bill Federer on what we can learn from the history we have studied. We'll be right back.
Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square.
Welcome back. I'm Janet Porter, who is guest hosting today for Truth and Liberty, and I'm very, very privileged to be here with my good friend Bill Federer. He is an encyclopedia, literally, of all our founders' quotes. The Speaker of the House relies on this, and so do I. It's a great thing. He's got a book out called Socialism, the Real History, from Plato to the present, and to New York, as it turns out. We've got a socialist running for mayor of New York. Hey, just give away free stuff till all the money is gone. That's where we're headed if we don't stop and do something about it. Bill's the guy to tell us how to stop it, how to learn from what they've done in the past. We just talked before the break about the one creating the crisis and the deception that happens as a result. And certainly the media has been a tool along those lines. Bill, let's pick up where we left off. It has to do with funding and creating a crisis. You know, hiring the thugs reminds me of when they paid people to give false testimony in the trial for Jesus. The testimony didn't add up, but there's a lot of things you don't really see that's under the surface. Like, I don't know, you have rallies in New York against ICE and Portland and around the country, and they all have the same equipment. And then the anti-Jewish Columbia University and around the country, they all have the same tents. Interestingly, they've been funded by someone, but this is nothing new, is it?
Right. As a matter of fact, Saul Alinsky, who Obama had worked with the Alinsky organizers in Chicago, he said that you cannot keep your followers on an emotionally motivated high level on one issue for a long time. So you need to keep switching up the issues. But it's the same people that you're mobilizing to carry out your agenda. And so it's Occupy Wall Street, and then it's autonomous zones and Black Lives Matters, and I mean it's one crisis after another, but it's the same people that are being mobilized, and they don't even know the recent history. They just follow whatever the instructions are. They get stirred up to be protesters. But this idea of creating crises, it all is based on the people not knowing the truth. Now, this is what I call the battle for the mind, or it's psychological warfare. And your spirit, mind, and body, your spirit is drawn toward God, your flesh, your body's drawn away from God, but the mind is the decider. It's the battlefield. Karl von Clausewitz was a 19th century military strategist, and he gave the classic definition of the purpose for war. The purpose for war is to get your opponent to submit to your will. Pretty simple, but you got all these weapons and all these bombs and guns, but it's all for what? To get your opponent to submit to your will. Well, then you have Sun Tzu's Art of War, 5th century BC, China, and he said, supreme excellence in a commander is to get your enemy to surrender without a fight, right? So it's a war, but if you can make them think you're more powerful than you are and make them think that they're weaker than they are, and you want to demoralize them and get them into fear and confusion, they'll surrender without a fight. I mean, what could be better than that? Mm-hmm. But the next step is what's called 5th generation warfare, where you get your opponent to submit to your will without them waking up and even realizing that they're in a war. If the goal is to get them to submit to your will, And you can do that without fighting, but even better, do that without them even knowing that there's a war going on. And so it's called psychological warfare. In World War II, the Allies had airplanes dropping pamphlets down on German villages that would say, your side is already lost. Your commander just hasn't told you yet. And these people would be like out in the trenches fighting. It's like, I read this pamphlet, said we already lost. I mean, it would demoralize them. And then the Japanese did it to us with Tokyo Rose, a Japanese woman, but she spoke in English, had this, seductive voice, but she'd be on the radio and the radio waves would go across the ocean to the ships. And she'd say, you Americans are terrible and horrible. You're doing this terrible stuff and that terrible stuff. And it would demoralize our guys. It's in the Bible. 12 spies went into the promised land. 10 came back with a negative report. Yep. There are giants in the land. The land devours the inhabitants thereof. We're grasshoppers in their sight. And they so put fear into the Israelites that they said, let's stone Moses and go back to Egypt.
By the way, none of the things they said, but none of those things they said were true. Because we find out later that they were shuddering in their boots because they had heard about the miraculous things God had done. He split the sea and we walked through dry land. The report was not only one that induced fear, but it was also inaccurate, factually inaccurate.
Yeah. And so this idea that the Israelites were defeated in their mind, they were defeated in their brain. They never even got a chance to fight. Right? Because they gave up, they surrendered in their mind because of this psychological warfare message that got in. In a flip side, Gideon, there's 100,000 Midianites. That's a pretty formidable army. And Gideon has 300 with torches under a clay pot. And then at the same time, they'd break the clay pot and hold up the torch and blow the trumpet. And so here's Gideon's 300 men standing around 100,000. And it's in the nighttime, it's pitch black, it's dark, they smash it, they blow the trumpets. And the Midianites get up in the dark and they're rushing and bumping into each other and pulling out their sword and start killing each other. They were defeated in their mind. It was all a psychological operation. And so we begin to see, wow, this is all over. The big aspect is you want to get your opponent to be discouraged, the shock and awe. You want to demoralize them, to disorient them, to distract, divide, and basically get them into fear. But then over and over again, God tells his people, anybody that's afraid, go home. Fear not, fear ye not, fear him not, fear thou not, fear them not, ye shall not fear no evil. So God is saying, look, trust in me, have faith, don't yield to psychological warfare. And so the tactic is done from the inside. And so this is what's called fifth generation warfare. So your enemy's outside the camp. They can try to make their enemy, like what was it? Robert E. Lee with McClellan on the Union side and Lee on the Confederates. And Lee would like move his troops over a hill on this spot and that spot. And they would just be marching. And McClellan was like, man, they must have this huge army because it's like all over the place, not realizing it was the same troops that would just sort of go forward and retreat from a distance. And so you can, when you see the enemy on the outside, you can get demoralized. But what's even better is you do this tactic from the inside. And so this fifth generation warfare, old-fashioned battles, you'd have two columns and then two flanks. Well, what's the fifth? That's your spies in the enemy camp sowing this confusion. And so Cicero said, a nation can survive its fools, even the ambition, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and he carries his banners openly. But the traitor moves among those within the gates freely. With sly whispers, he's heard in the very halls of government. He works secretly to undermine the pillars of a city, infect the body politic so that it can no longer resist. And so in ancient Greece, you had Philip of Macedon. He's the father of Alexander the Great. And he takes gold and bribes some of the 6,000 citizens in Athens to betray their own city. And so when they would get together in their agora marketplace and discuss politics, there was no king. It was just the people talking. And some people say, we need to get our defenses going. Philip is conquering Thebes. He's conquering Amphipolis. He's conquering these cities, and he's headed toward Athens, and we need to get our military. And these paid traders would stand up and say, wait a second, let's not get carried away. I heard Philip is not conquering these cities. He's liberating them. He's freeing them. And the people actually like him. And these paid traders would gather around them, what Lenin later called useful idiots, right? The college students that hold up the signs. So it's like, why are you out here? I'm not really sure. I don't know what river to what sea. It's just, and these useful idiots would join together with the paid traders, and it would so confuse the city of Athens that when Philip marched up to the gates, they couldn't mount an organized defense, and they throw the gates open, and Philip comes in and takes over. And so this idea.
I was just going to say, it looks to me like we dodged a bullet. Like these very tactics were being used in America. Well, we see it everywhere, but God intervened. I mean, and we saw in this last election, despite all of the election fraud, this could have been repeated again, could it not?
Oh, it definitely did, and that's why even though there's tensions between Elon Musk and President Trump, we have to give Elon credit for buying Twitter and breaking this narrative because they had all of this.
And pray for Elon Musk. Pray for him because this guy has a lot of, he could use his power for good and he could use it for not so good. And we just need to pray for him. I do think he's hungry for God. I love his little boy, X. But I think that he has brought some good things to the table in terms of the big, beautiful bill. There's some things that aren't so beautiful. It's the big part. It's the spending into oblivion part. And so, I just thought I'd mention that. We need to pray against that division, I believe.
I totally agree. Lord, bless Elon and draw him to you and reveal your truth in this situation to him.
Amen.
But here's a quote from Roosevelt. He says, "We have seen the treacherous use of the fifth column by which a person supposed to be peaceful visitors were actually part of an enemy unit of occupation." Imagine that. People coming over here pretending to be peaceful visitors.
Crossing the border,
FDR
for
said
example.
In May 26, 1940, FDR said, "Today's threat to our national security is the Trojan horse, the fifth column, that betrays a nation unprepared for treachery. Spies, saboteurs, traitors are actors in this new strategy." October 12th, 1942, FDR said, "Our enemies have spread falsehood and terror. They have started fifth columns everywhere. They have duped the innocent. They have fomented suspicion and hate between neighbors." And so this idea, here's FDR, that's the 1940s. And then let's look at the Cold War.
I just want to interject.
Stalin.
Look, it's not just between neighbors. Look at the division that has been sown between families. Remember about the whole COVID thing and vax and not vax and this election, who you're for, where you're from, and what it's you see the division everywhere, down to the family unit, even within the Christian homes.
Yeah, and so during the Cold War, so World War II is over. World War II is over, and you have new countries being formed out of what used to be, Nazi-controlled area, and they would have republics, and they would elect leaders, and they would be trying to dig themselves out of all the post-war crises, and it looked hopeful, but the Soviets didn't like that. So the Soviets sent in KGB agents to do critical theory. What's that? That's where you observe all the groups in a country: ethnic groups, Bosnians, Croats, Serbs; religious groups, Sunni, Shia, Orthodox; economic groups, racial groups, it doesn't matter. And you would call some victims and others oppressors, haves and have-nots. And then you would feed tensions between them and start protests that you would escalate into riots and violence and bloodshed. Why bloodshed? Because then people think emotionally and not logically. My friend just got killed. I don't want to talk politics. And then people want to blame somebody for all the problems. Like all this killing, I got to blame somebody. Who's at fault? And then they would co-opt the media to channel all that hatred and emotion toward the new leader of the new republic. It's his problem. It's his fault. It's his fault. And as people began to believe the media, that new leader's popularity would go down. And when it went down enough, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. So Eisenhower approves Operation Ajax under the CIA director, Allen Dulles. And it's the KGB thing in reverse. He sends over Kermit Roosevelt Jr., excuse me, the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, expert in foreign languages, goes to Tehran, and he organizes mobsters and gangsters and radical imams, and he stages protests and riots, and they, attack mosques. And then he co-opts the media to blame Mossadegh for all the problems. When his popularity falls, they do a coup or a rigged election, and they replaced Mossadegh with Reza Pahlavi, the son. And he loves America. And he is pro-America, and he's Cadillac Seville. That model of car was made in Iran, all right? I mean, it was like moving up, becoming more modern, and all pro-American until Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, with Zbigniew Brzezinski, all right, the national security advisor whose daughter Mika is on the MSNBC, they decided to pull the rug out from underneath of our ally and turn Iran over to the Ayatollah. And so they staged these. Carter was in touch with the Ayatollah while he was in exile in France, and then sort of stands back while the Ayatollah takes control. And then once Iran is in charge, is controlled by the Ayatollah, it starts funding Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, and they're spreading this Wahhabi violent religion. And so whenever you see Iran this, Iran nuclear weapons, Iran, thank Jimmy Carter, right? But we're talking these tactics. And so you have these regimes.
I just want to interject. I got to interject in this place just to say, as you're telling about all the kinds of things that are happening, that we saw the Israelis go in undercover, and they actually all at once took out those who were building the nukes in Iran. And then, what we saw the president do with Operation Hammer, to see that he basically saved, I believe, the world from a nuclear terrorist country, from an Iran that chanced death to America, death to Israel. And I just want to say, thank God for President Trump. Thank you that he stood with Israel and intervened in that case. But you're saying a lot of these problems all began when we got involved and other nations got involved, when we could have had a modern Iran that women there could have experienced freedom. But where it is right now, there needs to be some kind of change. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to interject that. Yeah. Amen. You know what we do? And pray for the Christians in Iran who were celebrating when the nukes were taken out, who are actually, they want freedom. They long for freedom. And so, Father, we just pray for the Iranians, those Christians who are longing for freedom, and those who don't yet know you, that they will have the freedom to know you and practice their faith in Jesus' name. Go ahead.
Yes. I wished that we would have let the Israel finish the job. Why? Remember when George H.W. Bush was going after Saddam, and then he stops, and the message to the Iraqi people was, on the inside you rise up against Saddam, but H.W. Bush stopped short of Baghdad, and then pulls out. And then you have Bill Clinton, but then you have George W., and he comes back in, right? And he's going to get rid of Saddam. Well, what happened? When the message came, here's this American army, and they're getting closer and closer, and there were people in Iraq that said, hey, this is our chance. And they were planning from the inside, and they were becoming more visible and more open about it. But when George H.W. Bush stopped short and pulled back, Saddam simply identified all the people that believed America was going to come in, and he rounds them up and kills them. So what has happened since the bombing of Iran? There was this message that had gone out, regime change. It's the people of Iran, rise up against your Ayatollah. Well, guess what? Some people believed us, and they did begin to rise up, and they did begin to organize, and they became more public about it. But then when the message was given, stop, Israel, no more, they were this close to wiping out all of the Iranian leadership. But when we said stop, and then we pulled back, guess what they're doing right now? They're rounding up all the people that believed us and said, oh, or at least thought there was going to be regime change, and they're killing them, hundreds of them. And so we need to pray for those people in Iran right now.
Do you think that'll be in the discussions? As I understand, the Prime Minister from Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is meeting with the president this week. Is there any discussion of maybe let us finish the job, Mr. President? I know that ceasefire seemed like a good idea. I don't know. You think that's on the table for discussion?
I mean, there are some things that I'm privy to and other things I'm not. I would hope that they would be able to have that regime change, because we have to remember between 1954 up until Jimmy Carter abandoned the Shah, what was that, 1979, I think, somewhere around there, you had Iran was as pro-American, or if not more pro-American than Israel. I mean, wow. The Shah loved America. Tehran loved America. They were, building stuff, like Cadillacs and cars and automobiles, and so, but one of the tactics of the psychological warfare is you sow this division. You have the fifth column going in. They want to create crisis, but they want to blame you for the crises that they start.
Yes.
And it's in the Bible as well. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him.
Right.
So it's called psychological projection or blame shifting. And little kids do it. I didn't start the fight, you did. Or a cheating spouse will accuse the faithful spouse of being unfaithful. Mm-hmm. Right? The cheating spouse is getting caught. It's like he accused. And I even found a military review magazine, December 1960. And it said, a review of Soviet psychological warfare. This is an example of propaganda technique of name calling. So a psychologist called projection. If you do something wrong, accuse the enemy of doing it before he accuses you. So David Axelrod was a campaign advisor for Obama. And on NPR radio, April 19th, 2010, he said, in Chicago, there was an old tradition of throwing a brick through your own campaign office window and then calling a press conference to say you've been attacked. Mm-hmm. Right? The campaign's going on, it's going on. And then the news headlines, a brick was thrown through the Democrat campaign office. And then he holds a press conference and hints that it was the Republican. And this innocent Republican candidate, like, I didn't do that, but his name keeps getting associated and repeating it. Candidate denies throwing a brick through the window. Well, all people see is the candidate and the brick. And they just keep repeating it until people make a subconscious connection, right? And so Nancy Pelosi called it the wrap-up smear.
Yes.
Where you say negative things about your opponent and then it picks up by the press and it gets spread. This projection, again, Elijah, the prophet, finally meets King Ahab. And what's the first words out of Ahab's mouth? Is that you troubler of Israel? And Elijah's like, excuse me, Ahab, you're the one troubling Israel, but you blame me. And they did it to the Apostle Paul. He's in the temple, shaved his head, fasting, praying, and some Pharisees see him stir up a riot. And the riot gets so bad that they shove Paul out and they shut the doors of the temple. The Romans come down, rescue Paul. They eventually have a trial. And the Tertullus, the Pharisee prosecutor, says, we have found this man, Paul, a pestilent fellow, a mover of sedition among the Jews, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who's gone about to profane the temple. And Paul gets up and he says, they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, neither in the synagogue nor in the city, neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. They're the ones that stirred up the riot, but they blamed this innocent Paul for stirring up the riot, right? Nero did the same thing. He set fire to Rome and he blamed the Christians. They even did it to Jesus. They accused Jesus of being demon-possessed, right? These Pharisees whose father is the devil accused Jesus of being demon. And Adam did it to God, right? He blame-shifted. Adam sinned. But he tells God, well, it's the woman you gave me. right? He had the audacity to try to blame God for his sin. And so this strategy we see over and over again. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of the State, she approved the Uranium One deal, where she got a lot of money off of giving a fifth of the U.S. uranium to Russia. And coincidentally, lots of deposits were made to the Clinton Foundation. And
this is treasonous, is it not?
Yeah, and when it became public, she paid for the Steele dossier to accuse Trump of colluding with Russia. And for 2 years, Trump colluding with Russia, Russian collusion.
They've got the playbook.
Joe Biden had classified documents in his garage that were illegal. He shouldn't have had them. So what do? They stage a very visible protest on Mar-a-Lago to get documents that they knew Trump had, right? And they were secure, but they accused Trump of what? Having classified documents. And over again, Trump, classified documents.
And then they had the audacity. Then they said that if Trump's elected, that he'll weaponize the government, the very thing that they were doing. It's really, I mean, do people buy into this still? Because it's just so obvious, it seems. Accuse them of what you're doing.
Yeah, Mitt Romney was running for president. And Harry Reid, the Senate leader, accuses Mitt Romney of not paying his taxes. And it gets negative press for Romney. He loses. And then after the election, Harry Reid's being interviewed by Time magazine. And they said, we did our research. Romney did pay his taxes. And Harry Reid said, I lied about Romney, but he didn't win, did he? It's like, oh my. There's no God. There's no right and wrong. It's just a political tactic. You just say a lie about somebody. Well, you've run for Congress.
I've run for Congress. It's they can pretty much say anything they want about you, and it's too late by the time you'd want to do anything about it. The election's taken place. Something needs to change there.
Yeah, Charlie Hurt on Fox News, Hannity, May 23rd, 2019, said this whole thing is like this game of projection. Whatever they accuse President Trump of doing, we then find out not only did President Trump not do it, but they did it. Right. So this is the tactic, and we've got 1 minute left,
Bill. So I want to give you a strong finish. So let you summarize all of this together, if you can.
Yeah. So the color revolution is this strategy where you get people into division, pit them against each other, co-opt the media to blame the leader of the country so that you can do a regime change and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet or something. These are psychological tactics that have been used on other countries through the Cold War. Obama turned them and used them inside on American people. 2012 Defense Authorization Act, he brought back this Mockingbird project where he can weaponize the government to lie to the people. 2015, Obama signed an executive order using behavioral sciences for the benefit of the American people. It's like, what's behavioral? It's PSYOPs. 2016, Obama signs the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which gives him the authority to decide what's disinformation, what's not, and to cancel anybody that says something different. And so what we're experiencing, right, is the deep state still has their fingers in the media, and they're trying to, the George Soros going in, paying for these riots in Los Angeles and so forth.
I'm afraid we've got to have to wrap it up, though, Bill.
There's the book,
if you live in New York, get his book, Socialism, The Real History, from Plato to Present. We're grateful. God bless you.